Levels of organization and energy flow. So what is ecology? Ecology is the scientific study of interactions between organisms and their environments, focusing on energy transfer. Ecology is a science of relationships. Folks, ecology is the study of how the organisms in an environment interact with the environment itself. You could say it's a study of the biotic and the abiotic, which we'll go into in a couple of minutes. The surroundings of an organism that affect its life and development is the environment. I had one of my students one time say, "Mr. West, are those clouds real?" I'm like, of course. Biotic factors. All the living factors in the environment is biotic. In fact, the prefix bio is Latin for life. So biology is the study of life. Biotic factors would be the predators, those are the ones who do the hunting. The prey, those are the ones who get hunted. And the producers, these are the ones who make the food. So all of these three are living, so they're all biotic factors. If you look at the right-hand side, we have an animal, a plant, another animal. All of those are biotic. Abiotic is all of the non-living factors in the environment. In fact, the prefix a in Latin means without. Of course, bio means life, so this means without life. It's all the things that are not alive, but the abiotic factors determine the biotic factors in an area. For example, we have sunlight in the top picture. Without sunlight, we couldn't have plants. So the absence of the sunlight would mean no plants. We also have temperature. If the temperature is not right, you will not have liquid water, and that would certainly affect life. So the abiotic factors determine the biotic. Some examples of abiotic factors. Again, abiotic is not alive. Sunlight, temperature, water, air, rocks, and soil. So these items here are not alive, but we do need them in order to have life. We have an ecosystem here. An ecosystem includes the biotic and the abiotic. So both of them determine the ecosystem. In fact, if you remember the definition ecology is the study of the biotic and the abiotic. It's the relationships, the study of the relationships between those two factors. Habitat is the place in which an organism lives out its life. It supplies the biotic and the abiotic factors an organism needs to survive. So if we see the desert here, we have the oceans, savanna, all of these are habitats. Those are places that organisms live. Forest, wetlands, tropical rainforest. Again, all of these are habitats. For the purpose of the video, we're going to skip this slide. An individual is a single member of a population. So in other words, if you were in a room all by yourself, you would be an individual representing the human species, representing the humankind. So an individual is one. Maybe if you're in a forest and you only see one squirrel in the forest, that squirrel will be an individual, a single member. A population is a group of the same types of organisms in the same area. For example, now you're in your room, but it's more than just you. You're not by yourself anymore. You have other classmates with you. All of you together would represent a population. So if we go back to the forest and we look at the squirrel, maybe there are several squirrels in that one area, and that would represent a population. But they all must be in the same species, the same type, same kind of animal to be in the population. A community is made up of different populations in an area. For example, now we're talking about you and your friends. That's one population, but you're also in the forest with a bunch of squirrels. All of you together in both species would be a community. So the community involves all of the species, all the different kinds of the biotic in that area, but it does not include the abiotic. So it would not include the soil, it doesn't include the water, the air, none of that. An ecosystem would, however, include the biotic and the abiotic. So now we're expanding beyond you and your friends and the squirrels, but now we're looking at the air you're breathing, the water that's in the area, the soil that you're standing on. All of this big area is an ecosystem. It's the living and the non-living, or you could say the biotic and the abiotic in one area. A biome are similar ecosystems working together. So for example, maybe it's a desert, maybe it's the savanna, and biomes would be huge areas. The tundra would be a biome. Rainforest would be a biome. The biosphere is any part on Earth where life exists. Maybe it's in the air because we have birds. Maybe it's in the water where the fish are. Maybe it's on land where we are. But anywhere there is life, biosphere. Don't forget, bio is Latin for life. Biosphere, anywhere on Earth or above, is biosphere. For the purpose of the video, we're going to skip this section. Now we're going to look at how does energy flow from one organism to another. Well, first of all, we got to start off with energy, and that's where we look at the autotrophs. Autotrophs are also called producers because they produce energy. Basically, they take solar energy and convert it to chemical energy. So they take the sunlight and they make food. Particularly, we're going to be talking about glucose in a later lesson. Photosynthesis. Photo means light. Synthesis means to make. So something is being made in the light, and again, that thing that's being made in the light is called glucose. It's a type of sugar. It's a monosaccharide, and we need it to perform basic functions that we need for life. But autotroph. Food contains nutrients and energy needed for survival. When an organism eats plants or other organisms, energy is transferred. So for example, if you're moving your hand right now, writing something down, the energy was transferred from the plant originally who received it from the sun. Solar energy was converted to chemical energy, glucose, and now it's transferred to you. Maybe you ate the plant. So one fish is being eaten by a bigger fish. The energy that's in that smaller fish gets transferred to a bigger fish. When a panda bear is eating the leaves, the energy that's in the leaf gets transferred to the bear. Heterotroph is also called a consumer. Heterotrophs, or you could say consumers, do not make their own energy. In order for them to get energy, they must eat an autotroph, or they must eat something that ate an autotroph. They rely on other organisms for energy and food. Whether you're a snake or a cheetah or a whale, you do not make your own food. You have to rely on eating something. That's why they call them consumers. We consume. Let's look at some different types of consumers. We have herbivore. Herbivore are animals that only eat plants. So examples here are a cow and a deer. Carnivore are herbivores. Carnivores only eat animals. For example, we have a cougar and a hawk here. They only eat animals. They do not eat the plants. The last category we look at is omnivore. Omnivore eats both plants and animals. So whether or not you're a human or a bear, we're all omnivores. We eat both plants and animals. Detritivore and decomposer. Detritivores feed on the remains of animals and plants, and the decomposer will break it down when the detritivore is finished. So the energy is transferred to the detritivore when they eat it, Or you could say the energy is transferred to the decomposer when they break it down. Energy flows in one direction, from the sun to the autotroph, and then to various heterotrophs, or consumers. So the sun has solar energy, and the solar energy is transferred to the plant, and the plant transfers its energy to the consumers when it's being eaten. The arrow points in the direction that the energy is flowing. Let's look at a food chain. A food chain is a two-dimensional representation of where the energy is flowing, a series of steps that shows where the organisms transfer the energy by eating and being eaten. The arrow always shows who is giving the energy to. It always begins with a producer. So we have the grass transfers its energy to the rabbit when the rabbit eats it. The rabbit transfers its energy to the snake when it gets eaten, and the snake transfers its energy to the owl when it gets eaten. This is called a food chain. So we have a food chain here. We have some plants that's being eaten, and notice that some of the energy is released as heat. Some of the energy goes into the soil, and some of it goes into the organism itself. And we'll talk more about the heat in another lesson, but the arrow again points where the energy is going. Again, some of it's lost as heat, or some of it goes to the organism doing the eating. Here's another food chain to the right-hand side. The algae gets eaten by the protus. The protus gets eaten by the squid. The squid gets eaten by the seal, and the seal gets eaten by the killer whale. It is a two-dimensional. It goes in one direction. This is a food chain. A food web is a little bit more complicated than a food chain. In fact, a food web contains two or more food chains. If you look at the picture on the left-hand side, you can start with the producer at the bottom, but you have several directions you could go. So each direction, each one of those arrows would be a food chain. So we could go all the way to the left, or we could start off going to the right, but each one of those are food chains. All of the picture would represent a food web. Food webs are more complicated. If you look at the picture on the right, same thing. You could start off with the grass and go to the insect, or you could start with the grass and go to the animal on the right. You have several positions you can go, several different directions. Food web is more complicated, three-dimensional. Notice that the food chains overlap in a food web. So you may be in one position on one food chain, but in a total different position in another food chain. And if you were to remove an animal from a food chain, it would affect the other food chains as well. So if we took away the wolf in the center picture on the right, the wolf would no longer be eating, for example, the bird. And if the wolf is not eating the bird, then the bird population would go up. If the bird population goes up, then that means the dragonflies population would go down, because you would have more birds eating the dragonflies.